You know, this place holds so many memories. Each item here tells a story of the past.
For as long as I can remember, there was something different about Grandma's house. Did back then, of course. None of us did. All we ever sensed was that Grandma carried a weight deeper than time, a sadness that flickered across her face whenever someone mentioned the past. I used to think it was just old age catching up to her. Now I know better. Now I know it was the burden of a truth she hoped would stay hidden long after she was gone. When she passed away last winter, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like it was holding its breath, as if the walls themselves had spent years guarding her secrets. And that's when everything changed. While going through her belongings, while trying to make sense of the life she left behind, I found something none of us ever expected. A letter dated exactly 40 years earlier, sealed with wax, and addressed not to the family, not to my mother or my uncle, but to me. A message from a woman who was no longer alive to explain it. It began on the day we gathered to clean out Grandma's old room. The house creaked under the winter cold, the same familiar groans I heard as a child when I'd run through the hallways with my cousins. Dust floated in the air like tiny memories refusing to settle, catching the morning light spilling through the curtains. Her room was frozen in time, her neatly folded blankets, the small porcelain lamp by her bedside, the faint scent of lavender in old books. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the last time I saw her alive. My mother was sorting clothes, my uncle was emptying her wardrobe, and I was drawn to her writing desk. It sat in the corner like a quiet witness, its dark wood polished smooth from years of her hands resting on it. I remembered her sitting there every evening, hunched slightly forward, the soft scratch of her pen filling the silence. She always locked the drawers afterward, and if anyone asked what she was writing, she would smile gently and say, "Just things I need to keep safe." Even then, I didn't know what safe meant to her. As I pulled the drawers open, one by one, I felt the strange tension that had always surrounded that desk. Old receipts, bookmarks, faded stationery, normal things. But then my fingers brushed against something odd, a wooden ridge that shouldn't have been inside the drawer. When I pressed on it, the bottom shifted with a soft, reluctant click. A hidden compartment. The kind people create when they want the world to forget something exists. Inside it was a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, the wax seal cracked but still holding. The handwriting on the front made my stomach twist. It was unmistakably hers, but the date in the corner was from 4 decades ago, long before I was born. And yet, my name was written on it. Not to my grandchild, not to the family, just my name, inked with a trembling certainty. As I held that envelope, everything inside me went still. Why would Grandma hide a letter for 40 years? Why was it meant for me? And what truth could be so heavy, so dangerous, so heartbreaking that she chose to hide it until she was no longer alive to explain it? The house suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the past had finally decided it was done being silent. And in that moment, before I even opened the seal, I understood one thing clearly. Whatever was inside that envelope wasn't just a message. It was the beginning of a story she had never been able to tell. A story that would change everything I thought I knew about her, about my family, and about the life she lived long before I ever came into it. For as long as I can remember, Grandma's house had rules, strange ones. No one was allowed to sleep in the guest room with the blue wallpaper. No one could touch the old radio in the living room. And above all, no one was ever to open the small wooden drawer built into the side of her antique writing desk. The desk sat beneath the window in her bedroom, always polished, always spotless, even though Grandma rarely used it. To others, it looked like a harmless, beautiful old piece of furniture. But to me, even as a child, it radiated tension. Adults avoided it. Grandma would flinch if we played too close to it. And whenever anyone asked what was inside that small drawer, she would simply say, "Some things belong to the past." But the past never stays buried forever. When I was a kid, I didn't think much of it. Every summer we visited her farmhouse, running through wheat fields, chasing chickens, and listening to Grandma hum old melodies in the garden. But every night, without fail, before we slept, she would lock her bedroom door and place the writing desk's key under her pillow, as if someone might try to take it from her. As I got older, the rule bothered me more. Why would a simple drawer matter so much? Sometimes I'd catch her staring at it, her face filled with a mixture of fear and longing. Once, when I was 14, I asked, "Grandma, what's in the drawer?" She froze. Her eyes, usually warm and full of humor, grew distant. "A letter," she whispered. "A letter no one must read." That was the only time she admitted anything. After that, she never spoke of it again. But secrets have a way of tightening their grip on a house. The older I grew, the more the drawer felt like a heartbeat in the room, quiet but constant. Something she protected so fiercely had to be important. Something she hid for 40 years had to carry weight. Everything changed last winter when she passed away. The house felt colder without her humming, without her soft shuffle on the wooden floors. We gathered to clear out her belongings, and every familiar object felt like a memory waiting to be revisited. But when I walked into her bedroom and saw the desk by the window, the silence became heavier. For the first time, the key wasn't under her pillow. It was inside the drawer of her nightstand, placed carefully on a hand-stitched cloth, as if she left it there for someone specific. As if she left it there for me. The moment I held it, something inside me tightened. A lifetime of warnings echoed in my head, but so did her final words to me, spoken just 3 nights before she died. "If you ever find the strength," she murmured, gripping my hand, "open the drawer, but only when you're ready for the truth." Ready or not, the moment had come. I stood before the writing desk, key in hand, heart hammering like I was about to break a sacred law. The room felt different, like it was waiting. Outside, the winter wind pushed against the windows, making the old house creak as if it too anticipated what was about to happen. With a deep breath, I inserted the key into the tiny lock. It clicked. And in that instant, the secret she had protected for 40 years finally stirred awake. The drawer slid open slowly, as if resisting after decades of silence. A faint smell of old paper and lavender drifted out, the scent Grandma always carried with her. Inside, wrapped carefully in a folded handkerchief embroidered with her initials, was a single yellowed envelope. Its edges were crisp with age, its color faded to a pale cream. But what froze me wasn't its appearance. It was the name written on it, my mother's name. My breath caught. My mother had passed away when I was only 6. I remembered her face only through pictures and fragments of moments, her laughter, her gentle touch, the lullaby she hummed. But no one in the family ever talked about her in detail. Whenever I asked about her past, conversations shifted, eyes dropped, and someone would quickly change the subject. Now, holding an envelope addressed to her, hidden away for decades, a terrible realization settled in my chest. Grandma had kept something from all of us, something that was meant for her daughter, not for us. My hands trembled as I lifted the envelope. It was sealed, but barely. The glue had long dried out. I hesitated. This letter was never meant for me. It felt like trespassing on something intimate, a message from a past I barely understood. But why did Grandma hide it? Why didn't she ever give it to my mother? Why was it important enough to guard with her life? With a deep breath, I opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of thin, delicate paper. The handwriting was neat, elegant, unmistakably my grandfather's. the man who died before I was born. His photographs hung in the hallway, always showing a strict but kind face, but the letter in my hands felt heavier than any framed memory. I began to read. My dearest Anna. The words blurred immediately as emotion tightened my throat. My mother's real name. She hated being called Anna. Everyone called her Annie. But he wrote it with such tenderness, it made me wonder what kind of father he had been in private. I do not know if this letter will reach you, but I pray that someday it finds its way back to you. There is something I must confess, something that your mother and I have kept hidden for far too long. My pulse thudded. Confess? Hidden? I read on. This secret was meant to protect you, but it has only brought distance and pain into our home. I fear the day you learn the truth, yet I fear even more the burden of never knowing. The room felt smaller. My hands shook. The next lines changed everything. You were never meant to grow up the way you did. You deserve to know who your real father is. My vision swam. I reread the sentence 3 times, each time feeling the ground slip away beneath me. Real father? Tears blurred the ink as I kept reading. My mistakes have cost us everything. The man who raised you is not the man who gave you life. The signature at the bottom was real, unmistakable. My grandfather had written this letter to my mother, but never gave it to her. My throat tightened as a wave of dizziness hit me. Questions erupted in my mind like an explosion. Who was her real father? Why did Grandma hide this? Why did she protect a secret that wasn't hers alone? And why leave the key for me? The weight of the letter settled over me like a storm cloud. I could feel Grandma's presence in the room, her silence, her warnings, her fear, and I understood that this wasn't the end of the mystery. It was only the beginning. The letter shook something loose inside me, an ache I didn't know existed. I sat on the edge of Grandma's bed, staring at my trembling hands, the yellowed paper, the words that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The house felt different now. Instead of memories, its walls seemed filled with echoes, missed conversations, hidden truths, and the weight of a story buried long before I was born. I read the letter again, slowly, hoping the words would change. They didn't. You deserve to know who your real father is. I whispered the sentence out loud, and hearing it spoken made the reality sharper. My mother never knew. She died without reading this, without confronting her parents, without learning her truth. Or had she known? Had Grandma hidden the letter because she wanted to spare her pain? Or because she wanted to protect the family from something darker? A knot formed in my stomach. I walked around Grandma's room, searching for clues, something, anything that might connect the dots. Her closet smelled like her lavender perfume. Her rosary hung neatly on the hook. Everything was in its place, except for the sudden chaos inside my heart. In the bottom drawer of her wardrobe, under her neatly folded scarves, I found an old photograph album. I carried it to the bed and opened it slowly. The first pages were filled with pictures of my mother as a child, smiling, carefree, laughing at the camera. But the next pages felt different. My grandfather was in many of them, posing stiffly, his arm around my mother. But in every picture, Grandma stood apart, her expression unreadable. Then I noticed something odd. In the earlier photos, my grandfather looked younger than he should have, almost too young. And in some photos, there was a man standing at the edge of the frame, a tall man with dark hair, never fully facing the camera. I leaned closer. His presence was strange, as if he didn't want to be seen. In one photo, he stood behind my mother, close enough to be family, but distant enough to avoid attention. He wasn't labeled like the others. No name, no date, no indication of who he was. My heartbeat quickened. Could he be the man mentioned in the letter? I flipped more pages, searching feverishly, but he disappeared after only 3 photos. Whoever he was, his presence was brief but unsettling, like a shadow in the background of someone else's life. Why would Grandma hide him? Why remove any trace of him except these forgotten photos? I closed the album and exhaled shakily. I needed answers. The first person who came to mind was Aunt Rose, Grandma's younger sister. She always talked in half-truths and nostalgic riddles, but she knew more about the family history than anyone, and she had never been good at keeping secrets. Before I left the room, I looked back at the drawer, at the empty space where the letter had been hidden for decades. The house creaked softly, as if exhaling the same long-held breath I now carried. This wasn't just about a letter. It was an entire life rewritten, and I was now the only one left who could uncover the truth. I grabbed my coat, the letter, and the photo album, and headed out into the cold winter air, toward the only person who might tell me why Grandma spent 40 years afraid of a piece of paper. Aunt Rose lived in a small cottage at the edge of town, surrounded by rose bushes she tended with almost obsessive dedication. As I walked up the stone path, the smell of soil and blooming petals mixed with the chill of winter air. She opened the door before I could knock, as if she had been waiting. Her eyes widened when she saw the envelope in my hand. "Oh, God," she whispered, stepping back. "You opened the drawer, didn't you?"
I froze. You knew about it? She didn't answer. Instead, she motioned me inside. Her living room was warm, cluttered with floral cushions, porcelain birds, and a faint smell of cinnamon tea. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she poured herself a cup. "I told your grandmother to burn it," she said quietly, but she could never bring herself to do it. I placed the letter on the table. "Tell me who he was." Aunt Rose closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "Your mother's real father wasn't the man you called Grandpa. His name was Daniel Hale." The name was unfamiliar, but something in Aunt Rose's tone told me this wasn't a simple love triangle. She continued, "Your grandmother met him before she married your grandfather. Daniel was a school teacher, gentle, kind, the sort of man who could make anyone feel safe. But something happened, something none of us could stop." A chill crawled up my spine. What happened? Aunt Rose's voice lowered. "He disappeared." My heart stuttered. Disappeared? How? "No one knows. One day he left for work and never came home. No body, no note, no trace. Your grandmother was devastated, and then she found out she was pregnant." Her words sank into me like stones. So that was the secret Grandma carried. But it didn't explain everything. "Then why hide the letter?" I asked. "Why keep it for 40 years?" Aunt Rose hesitated, then retrieved something from her cabinet, an old newspaper clipping. The headline made my blood run cold. "Local teacher suspected in series of mysterious disappearances." I blinked. This can't be the same Daniel. Aunt Rose's voice cracked. It was. The article detailed 3 missing girls, all last seen on the same route Daniel took home. No evidence, no charges, just suspicion, and a town eager for a villain. My hands shook as I processed the information. "Grandma didn't want to believe it," Aunt Rose whispered. "But when he vanished too, everything pointed to something terrible. She hid the truth to protect your mother from the shame." My stomach twisted. My mother's real father might have been a criminal, or worse. But the letter from my grandfather hinted something else. Regret, pain, a hidden truth he believed would change everything. "Do you think Daniel was guilty?" I asked. Aunt Rose wiped a tear. "I don't know. But your grandmother, she always believed he was killed. Not missing, not guilty. Killed." The room felt colder now. "And she thought if Annie, your mother, knew the truth, it would destroy her."
I stared at the letter, the missing pieces swirling in my mind. A teacher who vanished, newspaper accusations, a family secret buried for decades. But something didn't add up. If Daniel disappeared without a trace, why did my grandfather write, "My mistakes have cost us everything"? I left Aunt Rose's house with my head spinning. Daniel Hale, a vanished teacher, newspaper suspicions, a family shielding a daughter from the truth. But the biggest question burned in my mind. What mistakes was my grandfather talking about? Back at Grandma's house, I sat at her writing desk again, the letter spread out in front of me. The handwriting was careful, emotional, full of guilt. I read every line, searching for hidden meaning. Then I noticed something odd. The paper had 2 layers. Holding it up to the window, I saw faint writing bleeding through the back, writing I hadn't noticed before. My pulse quickened. I turned the page over. There was a second letter, a confession, written in the same handwriting, but never meant to be seen. My guilt consumes me. I fear the truth of what happened that night will never be forgiven. My heart slammed against my ribs. That night? Which night? I continued reading. I met Daniel that evening. I confronted him. I demanded he stay away from Anna until we could settle things. But the argument became heated. I pushed him. The world tilted. What? I did not mean for him to fall. At the cliffside, it was dark. I could not see the bottom. I called his name again and again, but there was no answer. My mouth went dry. My chest tightened. My grandfather killed him? Even if by accident? I read the final paragraph with shaking hands. I covered it up. I told your mother he ran away. I lied to your grandmother. I buried this secret for years, but it lives inside me like a wound that refuses to heal. If you are reading this, my beloved Anna, then I failed to protect you from the past. I felt a roaring in my ears. A painful mix of disbelief and horror washed over me. Everything Grandma hid suddenly made sense. The fear, the drawer, the secrecy, the warnings, the way she protected the letter like it was a curse. She was protecting us from the truth. But one detail still gnawed at me like a splinter. If my grandfather pushed Daniel off the cliff, why was there no body? Could he have survived? The thought chilled me. I looked again at the photographs of the tall man with dark hair. He appeared in only a few pictures, always on the edge, as if lurking, watching. A terrible possibility hit me. What if Daniel came back? What if Grandma discovered something that terrified her enough to hide the letter forever? Before I could think further, a loud knock on the door startled me. I froze. Who would come to Grandma's abandoned house this late? I walked slowly to the door, heart pounding. When I opened it, icy wind rushed in, but no one stood outside. Only an envelope on the doorstep. My blood turned cold as I picked it up. It had no stamp, no address, just one line written on the front. You're looking in the wrong place. My hands shook as I held the mysterious envelope. Someone had been here, someone who knew exactly what I was uncovering. The wind howled through the yard, rattling the loose gate, but there was no sign of footsteps, no silhouette in the distance. Whoever left it had vanished into the night. I stepped back inside and locked the door, pulse hammering. The envelope felt warm, as if recently held. I ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photograph. I lifted it slowly, and my breath caught. It was my grandmother, taken maybe 10 years ago. She was standing near the old cliffside trail outside town. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man, tall, dark hair. The same face I had seen in those old family photos, but older now, lined with age, eyes filled with intensity. Daniel Hale. It had to be. But he had disappeared over 40 years ago. My hands trembled violently. If this photo was real, if Daniel survived the fall, then everything my grandfather confessed was only half the truth. A scribbled message on the back made my stomach twist. Ask her why she wanted the letter hidden. I stared at the words until they blurred. Why would Grandma hide the letter unless Daniel wasn't the man she remembered? Unless the truth she feared wasn't just her husband's confession, but the return of a man she once loved? A knock on the window made me jump. I spun around, heart slamming. Outside, through the frosted glass, stood a silhouette, tall, completely still, watching. My throat tightened. I backed away slowly, clutching the letter. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like a shadow stitched to the winter night. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, but before I could dial anyone, the silhouette turned and disappeared into the darkness. I rushed to the window, but the yard was empty again. Fear crawled up my spine. Someone was playing a dangerous game. Someone who knew more about my family than I did. I needed answers, real ones. There was only one place left to look. The cliff. The place where Daniel supposedly died. I grabbed my coat, the letters, and the photograph and drove through the icy night. The road twisted through bare trees rattling in the wind, branches scraping the sides of the car like whispers. Reaching the cliffside trail, I stepped out into the biting cold. The moon illuminated the jagged rocks and the deep drop below. My breath formed clouds in the air as I walked forward, heart thundering. I reached the exact spot where my grandfather had confronted Daniel. The earth was uneven, the ground still crumbling at the edges. I closed my eyes, imagining the fight, the fall, the silence afterward. And then I saw it. Footprints. Fresh ones, leading away from the cliff, not toward town, but toward the old cabin in the woods. The cabin Grandma refused to speak about. The cabin she avoided her whole life. The place she visited only once a year, with flowers. A chill deeper than the cold night ran through me. This wasn't about a hidden letter. This wasn't about a long-lost father. This was about something unfinished. Something my grandmother tried to bury in silence. And now someone wanted me to dig it up. I followed the footprints into the woods, branches snapping under my feet, the wind carrying faint sounds that could have been leaves or whispers. The cabin appeared through the trees like a dark wound in the forest. And as I approached, I saw a light flickering inside. Someone was there, waiting. The cabin door creaked as I pushed it open. A single oil lantern burned on the table, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something old. In the corner, a figure sat in a wooden chair, facing away from me. My heart nearly stopped. "Daniel?" I whispered, my voice shaking. The figure shifted slightly, but didn't turn. "I knew you would come," he said, his voice low, weary. My mouth went dry. "You survived." A long pause. "Survived," he murmured. "If you can call this surviving." He stood slowly. When he turned toward me, I saw a man aged beyond his years. Deep lines carved his face, and his eyes, once gentle in the old photographs, now held a storm of regret, anger, and grief. Why? I choked. Why leave the envelope? Why follow me? Why now? His gaze dropped to the floor. Because she's gone, he whispered, and with her, the only promise I ever kept. I didn't understand. What promise? Not to come for her, he said. Not to take her away. Not to ruin her life again. My chest tightened. My mother. Daniel nodded. Your grandmother begged me. After the fall, after your grandfather thought he killed me, I disappeared. I hid, but I wasn't dead. And one night she found me. She told me the truth. She told me Anna believed I had abandoned her. Pain flooded his expression. She asked me to stay gone for the sake of her family. I shook my head, overwhelmed. But the newspaper, the accusations, were they true? He looked straight into my eyes. No. The word echoed in the small cabin with the weight of a lifetime. I was innocent. Someone else was responsible for those disappearances, but the town needed a face, and I was already gone. He walked toward the lantern, running his fingers along its metal edge. I loved her, he whispered, your mother, more than anything. But when your grandmother begged me to disappear, I did, for her happiness, for her future. Tears burned my eyes. All these years, my mother lived without knowing the truth. Why leave the message on the doorstep? I asked. His jaw tightened. Because your grandfather's letter didn't tell you everything. He reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. This one newer, crisper. I wrote this for her, but she died before I could give it to her. And your grandmother, he finished. She hid it. She didn't want the past to return. She didn't want me to come back into your lives. She believed she was protecting you all. I hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted me from the beginning. Why show yourself now? He exhaled deeply. Because a promise binds a man only as long as the one he made it to lives. She's gone now, and I wanted someone, anyone, to know that I loved her, that I never abandoned her, that her life mattered to me. The lantern flickered, casting soft shadows. I stepped closer. So what happens now? Daniel smiled sadly. Now, nothing. I will disappear again. My story ends here. I shook my head. No, not anymore. The truth will come out. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Some truths destroy more than they heal, he whispered. Before I could respond, he walked past me, opened the door, and stepped into the forest. His figure faded into the darkness, swallowed by trees and winter silence. I stood alone in the cabin, the new letter trembling in my hand. The final truth wasn't just about a hidden father or a deadly fall. It was about love, sacrifice, and the burdens our elders carry so we don't have to. As the lantern dimmed, I whispered into the quiet, I'll tell her story, all of it. And for the first time, I felt the house of secrets begin to breathe freely again. If you're enjoying this mysterious journey into Grandma's past, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. Your support helps keep these long-form stories alive. What would you do if you found a letter hidden in your home for 40 years? Would you open it immediately or wait to understand why it